Hello everybody and welcome to our first video in our series of videos looking at the United Nations, and in this video we will be looking at why the UN was set up and how it works. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes, so by the end of this presentation you guys should know the three systems set up to help shape the new world order after World War II. You guys should know the five main organs of the UN and what they do. And finally, you guys should know a fact about the Bretton Woods system, or the IMF, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The foundation of the United Nations began with a meeting of Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt in August of 1941 during World War II. The US hadn't even joined the war at this point, and here it was decided that a new organization was needed to replace the League of Nations that had been such a failure. They issued a document known as the Atlantic Charter, stating that neither country should claim territorial gains after the war, and that people should be allowed to choose their own government, and for this new organization to help stop future wars. Of course, after World War II, the world found itself with two countries having emerged as superpowers, the United States and the USSR. And in 1945, the US had half the wealth of the world and began setting out its model for a new world order. So they looked to establish this using three systems: the UN for political issues in the world, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to deal with social issues, and the Bretton Woods system to deal with economic issues. So on the 25th of April in 1945, delegates from 50 countries met in San Francisco to set out a charter, or the rules for the UN, which was drawn up within 2 months of the meeting. The UN came into being officially in June of 1945, with the stated goal being to keep world peace and to promote equal rights, and also to develop friendly relations between nations. There are five main parts or organs of the UN. The biggest organ is the General Assembly, and at the moment there are 193 countries represented in the General Assembly. This has grown from the 51 that were represented at that first meeting in June of 1945. They meet to discuss international peace and cooperation and to deal with humanitarian crises. So each member state has one vote, and for something to pass law, they have to have a two-thirds majority. The most powerful and controversial organ of the UN is the Security Council. So the Security Council consists of 15 members now, 10 of which are non-permanent and elected every 2 years. And this was expanded from the 6 non-permanent members in the 1960s. There are 5 permanent members of the Security Council: the US, Russia, China, the UK, and France. Now, the Security Council can impose sanctions or even authorize the use of force to maintain or restore international peace and security. The most controversial part of it is that these 5 permanent members actually have a veto, which means that they can stop any resolution, even if it has passed the General Assembly by a large majority. Now, the USSR or Russia used this a lot in the beginning to primarily deny other countries entry into the UN so that it wouldn't be weighted too much towards the US. Since the 1970s, however, the US has used the veto the most, and usually that is in regards to the Israeli conflict in the Middle East. Another organ is the Economic and Social Council, which is set up to improve the economic and social conditions of the world. Then there is the UN Secretariat, which includes the UN staff members who carry out the day-to-day running of the UN. The head of the Secretariat is the Secretary General, who is elected by the General Assembly and the Security Council, and he is the Chief Administrative Officer of the UN. The very first Chief Secretary was Trygve Lie from Norway, and he served from 1946 to 1952, when he was forced to resign after the Soviet Union claimed that he took a pro-US stance in the Korean War, where the UN sent troops to deal with the North Korean invasion of South Korea in the 1950s. So there was controversy even from the beginning. The final organ that we will be looking at is the International Court of Justice, which is to settle legal disputes that are submitted by the states. However, once again here, permanent Security Council members have to agree to these judgments, which kind of undermines the whole process. There was also an organ of it that is no longer in existence called the Trusteeship Council, which was set up to look after the interests of territories that hadn't gained their independence. And it played a major part in the decolonization process in Africa and places like that after World War II. However, in 1994, after Palau gained its independence, the operations were suspended. So, underneath these organizations operate specialized agencies. So, for example, underneath the Economic and Social Council are organizations like the WHO or the World Health Organization, who really came to the public eye in 2020 with the COVID-19 global pandemic. And this organization was responsible for stopping the spread of diseases like cholera and TB, smallpox, AIDS, and Ebola. Um, it is also underneath this organ that we find the IMF, and the IMF operates as an organization that is responsible for implementing the second system of that new world order that we talked about, the Bretton Woods system. So this International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, has really failed to live up to its early intentions, which were to liberalize trade, but also to regulate capital so that large businesses can't dictate policies to governments by threatening to leave the country. It had been doing its job quite well up until the 1970s, when Richard Nixon and British governments removed a lot of these controls on capital, which led to massive profits for the rich, but has led to a huge amount of inequality around the world now, as this Bretton Woods system has been shifted somewhat. The final system in the New World Order that was set up to deal with social issues was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was based on four freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from fear, and freedom from want. Now, the Declaration of Human Rights contains 30 articles setting out the fundamental human rights that should be universally protected. It builds on what we've talked before about with the Universal the Rights of Man that was published in the French Revolution, and it was drawn up by 48 countries and was passed by the UN in 1948. Now, in our next video, we will be looking at how well the UN has operated in helping to uphold the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and its aims of keeping international peace. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now you guys should know the three systems that were set up to help shape the New World Order after World War II. You guys should know the five main organs of the UN and what they do. And you guys should know a fact about the Bretton Woods system and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Thanks for watching, and hope you guys got something good from this video.